Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. I'm Jenna Ellis. Join me tonight for Jenna Ellis Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Salem News Channel. So much controversy over the RNC's new platform that has excised a lot of their very strong pro-life position and also on the sanctity of the definition of marriage and the family. Our legal eagles are going to join to discuss what can Congress actually do under the Constitution and under the 14th Amendment in the wake of the Dobbs decision on regulation of abortion. So many people are suggesting, no, this is just a state issue. That is not correct. Our legal eagles are going to set the record straight tonight. Plus, my good friend Brilyn Hollyhand has a great new book out, and you're not going to want to miss that. And Matt Tierman drops by to talk about the elections going on in the UK and France. Tune in tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing and investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So as much as the Democrats have been facing their existential crisis with their potential nominee being Joe Biden or someone else, the Republican National Party is also facing one of their own. So coming out yesterday from the RNC has been this draft of a new platform that has watered down language on pro-life and also on same-sex marriage and really excised a lot of the social issues that particularly evangelicals and Catholics and Christians have really been pushing for, and Trump was known for in embracing that platform in 2016. So let's take a look at what the language said in 2016 versus what it says now. So this was the 2016 RNC platform, a text with respect specifically to pro-life. It says this: the Constitution's guarantee that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property deliberately echoes the Declaration of Independence's proclamation that all are endowed by their Creator with the inalienable right to life. Accordingly, we assert the sanctity of human life and affirm that the unborn child has a fundamental right to life which cannot be infringed. We support a human life amendment to the Constitution and legislation to make clear that the 14th Amendment's protections apply to children before birth. We oppose the use of public funds to perform or promote abortion or to fund organizations like Planned Parenthood, so long as they provide or refer for elective abortions or sell fetal body parts rather than provide health care. We urge all states and Congress to make it a crime to acquire, transfer, or sell fetal tissues from elective abortions for research, and we call on Congress to enact a ban on any sale of fetal body parts, and in the meantime, we call on Congress to ban the practice of misleading women on so-called fetal harvesting consent forms, a fact revealed by a 2015 investigation. we will not fund or subsidize healthcare that includes abortion coverage. That is a really strong stance, and it's specifically referring to Congress and the 14th Amendment. Now, listen to the 2024 platform that is much more concise and really watered down, even though it does give a little bit of an acknowledgement to the 14th Amendment. It says this: we proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. Notice it doesn't say we demand that they do, they're free to. Goes on to say, after 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. Again, no mention of Congress. But they conclude with this: we will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF fertility treatments. Now, I agree with the 2024 platform. I just think that the 2016 one was so much stronger. And a lot of people who are suggesting, well, we can't win an election if we are that firm on the stance for abortion. Well, we did in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. And why should it be that we will support, as conservatives, any party that's just a little bit more maybe to the right of the Democrats? No, that's not what we all signed up for and what we are supporting if we are truly principled conservatives. We should be demanding that the RNC go back to the 2016 platform. Here's what my friend Tony Perkins and FRC Action had to say as a statement in response. The 2024 platform is a concise statement of campaign priorities, but not a declaration of enduring principles for a political party. They're totally right. Unfortunately, the choreographed process, which allowed no amendments to be discussed or voted upon, was unbecoming of a party that champions free speech and due process. Delegates were given the platform this morning when they entered the convention hall with no time to review, much less the 72 hours that Republican lawmakers call for in the House of Representatives. Delegates were only given a few minutes of discussion before the quote-unquote debate was ended and a vote was taken. Ironically, the document calls for a vigorous defense of free speech and the end of government censorship. Deprived of the opportunity to discuss amendments to the draft platform document, we have submitted a minority report to supplement that campaign's platform. The submission of a minority report is further evidence that the pro-life movement will continue to advance pro-life principles and policies at every level of government. The right to life transcends other political debates and the interests of any and all political parties and candidates. It is truly the right without which no other right has any meaning. It's so true. So let's bring in our legal eagles to discuss. Our legal eagles today are Gerard Filitti, who is the senior counsel for the Lawfare Project, and Ron Coleman, who is the host of the Coleman Nation podcast and an attorney with the Dillon Law Group. So, gentlemen, for purposes of this discussion, a lot of the reaction and response in the last 24 hours since this draft platform that has been passed by the committee has been, well, the Dobbs decision did give abortion regulation back to the states. No mention of Congress is correct. And if you want to follow the Constitution, then you'll see that this is only and solely a state issue. But that's not what the Dobbs decision held. It said that the right for abortion regulation, or the power rather, is returned to the people through their elected representatives. That includes Congress, and the 14th Amendment specifically provides for that. So, Gerard, let's start with you. I mean, what should people really understand about what Congress's power actually is under the Constitution if we are talking about abortion regulation at the federal level?
First, people need to understand the Roberts Court. And the Roberts Court, since he became Chief Justice, has tended to send things back to the legislature to take action on, informing decisions on the basis that it's not for the courts to make the laws, it's for the courts to interpret them. And that has been very consistent. So the problem with Roe v. Wade is that it was not something that was passed by legislature. It was a judicial fiat. It was law made by courts rather than law made by elected officials. And that takes us back to who has the power to make these laws. Right now, it's the states, but it's also Congress. Congress can legislate abortion. Congress can get into the business of legislating as it is supposed to, as it's meant to. And this is not an issue that would be prescribed by the 14th or other amendments. It's just a matter of carefully justifying the basis of a law and defining it to fit the contours of what Congress can do. And again, Congress can act, They just have not done so in decades.
Yeah, and I think really, Ron, I mean, it's because there is no consensus at Congress. And if the Democrats are in control, they're going to try to basically codify Roe versus Wade. Joe Biden is very clearly and openly running on that proposition. So why is it that Donald Trump and the Republican Party is afraid to stand up firmly and say, no, we want to have abortion regulation, even if they agree on something like a heartbeat bill or 15 or 16 weeks? I would rather, as a pro-life conservative, at least see that, and then states can take it further if they want to.
Well, the consultants have sold the party leadership a bill of goods, which mirrors what you hear in the mainstream media, to the effect that abortion is what hurts Republicans with women. Abortion is the soft spot, so let's pull back on abortion. I think that's a mistake, not only because it's an unprincipled position to take. We make lots of compromises in politics, and we compromise with many principles. I think it's a mistake because I don't believe that these positions are going to get them any female votes that are decided on the abortion issue.
Yeah, and that's a really excellent point, that nobody is going to be reading this party platform who was all for Joe Biden and codifying Roe and go, oh, well, because Donald Trump and the Republican Party have watered this down and they're just giving it to the states, well, now I don't fear for democracy anymore. I'll go ahead and vote for Donald Trump. I mean, what realistically does this get them? Ron, I'll stay with you on this because, so many of the pro-Trump advocates right now on social media are claiming that if we stood as firmly in the Republican Party as we did in 2016, and that Trump did as much as we did in 2016, that he wouldn't win. And there's just absolutely no evidence for that.
Well, evidence is hard to come by in this kind of prognostication business. I do think it's a calculated move that was made with the best of intentions with respect to maximizing the chances of not only Donald Trump's election, but also down ticket votes. And perhaps that's really what motivated it. Perhaps those who pushed for this would take the view, you're right, Ron, we're not going to change any votes in the presidential election, but we're making it a little bit easier for Republican candidates in tight races, of which there are going to be many in the House, and to some extent in the Senate, don't have to outright disavow or play footsie with the GOP platform. It's not in and of itself an insane position.
Yeah, and Gerard, to Ron's point, this isn't just a presidential federal platform. This is even on statewide offices, and there have been a number of GOP members who have ran in primaries and also for generals as well, who have been pro-choice that the GOP has acknowledged and even funded. So do you see that it's problematic in terms of watering this down for statewide races as well, even if we take their position, okay, that the main battlefield for abortion regulation is on the state level?
Well, I think even at the state level, there are issues. We saw this in congressional races, in off-peak elections. We saw this in Long Island, for example, a few months ago, to fill the seat that George Santos vacated. Abortion actually was an issue that was considered a top priority by a lot of voters. We see this statewide as well. And ultimately, the issue is that a conservative in, say, New York or Massachusetts is not necessarily the same as a conservative in Alabama or Texas or Arizona. There are different priorities. There are different ways of looking at things. And if you have a standard party line and you embrace it too staunchly, to adhere to it too rigidly, then you're risking votes in those places that don't agree or don't entirely see the party line as benefiting the local populace. So for local elections, you do have to be mindful of what the local people want, even if that is not something that the entirety of the party agrees on. You want to have some moderation. So that's why you do see issues. You do see this issue coming up in races in local elections a lot.
And we're going to have to take a hard break here, but we'll be back with our legal eagles for more of the controversy right after this. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping, too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. We're back with our legal eagles, Gerard, Filitti, and Ron Coleman. So, gentlemen, let's talk about the Democrats' controversy and their disaster. Joe Biden is saying that he is staying in the race. He posted this, or, well, of course, his interns or somebody in his White House. He himself, I don't think, is sitting there actually on his phone. But this was posted to Joe Biden's X account yesterday. This morning, I sent a letter to my fellow Democrats on Capitol Hill. In it, I shared my thoughts about this moment in our campaign. It's time to come together, move forward as a unified party, and defeat Donald Trump. The letter was like 2 pages saying that I think that I'm the best person to beat Donald Trump, and if I didn't, I would get out. I mean, he actually, in my view, challenges God a little bit by, saying that nothing can prevent him except God Almighty from coming out of the race. And, in my experience, if you tempt God, we have kind of a whole Bible of showing that if you tempt God, not really a good idea, Joe Biden. But also, it's very interesting to see how the mainstream media and the leftist media is coming out with what appears to be a coordinated campaign calling on Biden to get out of the race. And this segment aired on NBC with a Parkinson's expert talking about how this, in his view, is the analysis of Joe Biden's cognitive difficulties. Watch this.
You noticed anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Oh, yeah. I see him 20 times a day in clinic. I mean, it's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemino dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Rigidity, loss of arm swing, standing up lordically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of end block turning. It's not a quick turn. So that's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the low voice that said was a cold hypophonia. A small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism. I could have diagnosed him from across the mall.
Here are some of the symptoms from Parkinson's. We just had him up there on the screen. If we can put him back. What about the movement? Some people have pointed out the way he walks. Sometimes it's not very fast, small steps. Is that something that is common in people who are battling a disease like Parkinson's?
Yeah, it's a hallmark. Shuffling gait, we call that, so little steps. Loss of arm swing from the rigidity. When we walk, we have a nice cadence. You notice he doesn't really swing his arms. And end block turning, meaning he kind of pivots around his foot. If you said, hey, President Biden, he wouldn't go like this. So, yeah.
But I also know, tell me if I'm wrong here, it's very hard to diagnose Parkinson's, isn't it? It's not simple. I mean, I've heard that it can be.
It's one of the easier movement disorders to diagnose, actually.
Right,
but it's so clinic. There's very little other. And I'm a Democrat. I always say about this.
Right.
It's just like, this guy is not a hard case.
But I've had relatives who have gone through neurological issues, and I've heard that sometimes Parkinson's is not very easy to nail. You have to take a lot of tests.
It's early on. If you're just presented with like hallucinations, that could be a variety of things, or just the cognitive problems. That could be Alzheimer's versus Parkinsonism, and that becomes a little nebulous. But once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms,
right? Slow
movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. I mean, if a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated.
So let me ask you, you're a Democrat, you're a doctor. You sound like you're frustrated with what the White House is saying.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because, I'm an American before everything. And I look at it and say, when I used to see Russia, Soviet Union, North Korea, when they just make outrageous things, like when North Korea can't keep the lights on and they say, oh, it was some faulty power thing. I kind of hate that kind of stuff. They had 4 years. My own party had 4 years to find, this was a wreck in slow motion. And they had 4 years to find, out of 350 Americans, one person that could take the place. And here we are the day before school trying to do the homework and replace a guy who's got a neurodegenerative disease.
Dr. Pitt.
Ron, so this was wild to me. I mean, where was this doctor on, NBC and CNN and all of this stuff 3 years ago, right? I mean, of course, they're not going to invite him on to do that. But this just shows the Democrats in the White House have been lying to us for, at least, I think, 3.5 years. But isn't it time to invoke the 25th Amendment?
Yes. There's really nothing to talk about.
Simple answer.
Nothing to talk about.
Right?
And this is beyond dementia, right? Parkinson's disease is a truly, unfortunately, debilitating disease. I'm not saying that dementia isn't a big deal, but it's a degenerative disease. This doctor, batted away all the speaking points to the MSNBC interviewer, set him up with stuttering. This has got nothing to do with stuttering, as if anyone with any rational comprehension who was familiar with Joe Biden's career over the last 50 years has ever thought of him as a stutterer. With nothing to, and this is not a hard diagnosis. It is what it is. I could spot it across the mall. Of course, the man is unwell. He was never a good person. He was never a bright person, but he was a hell of a lot more of a person than he is now, and certainly not presidential material.
Yeah. So, Gerard, I mean, if the vice president and the majority members of the cabinet are unwilling to invoke the 25th Amendment, I mean, there is provision that Congress could legislate another body. I spoke with Representative Chip Roy this morning on my radio show, and he just said, the Democrats aren't going to have the political will, and probably not even the Republicans, to actually do that in this instance and legislate accordingly. So what happens and what is America left with if the vice president and the majority of the cabinet is unwilling to actually acknowledge the truth? I mean, is there any mechanism of accountability for that?
Realistically, none. If the 25th Amendment is not invoked and Biden doesn't step down on his own, then we're left wondering who's the person actually making decisions. Is it Kamala Harris? Is it the chief of staff? Is it Jill Biden? These are questions that should be asked, and we should, quite frankly, be asking who's been making decisions for the last few years. But without implementing the 25th Amendment, there's really nothing that can be done. And again, once again in this election cycle, we are in an unprecedented situation with a presidential candidate, the actual sitting president, who is dealing with a situation that we've never had in our country's history and hopefully will never have again. This is something that can't be allowed to continue. We need clarity on a president's fitness to be in office.
Yeah, and that seems very basic. So why don't we have the political will, at least for, I mean, there are some Republicans calling for this, Ron, and I think that this is the principled position, but it seems like Republicans are just so concerned about November, and they're thinking, well, Donald Trump has a better chance against Joe Biden than anybody else. So, we'll just let it slide for the next 7 months that we have these national security concerns. And Biden has said, don't schedule anything between, 8 p.m. and 10 a.m. And so I guess if there's a nuclear crisis, I mean, is he going to accidentally press the nuclear button instead of his life alert button? I mean, these are sincere questions that Americans need responses to.
Jenna, you may be right that the consideration is a political one based on November. I'm not sure that it's a political one based on November because Biden is the strongest candidate or the weakest candidate. It may be because Republicans don't want to be the ones who push the removal of a president right before the election, which in and of itself will be used as a political weapon. We do have a tool. That tool is the 25th Amendment, and there is a limit to how much you can anticipate with legislation, and in this case, constitutional provisions. I've said many times that the system ultimately relies on trust and openness and checks and balances. Here, we're not in a trust environment. We're not in a trust-based regime. The press has lied to us, and here we are.
Yeah, well, and I certainly don't trust Kamala Harris or the majority members of the cabinet as far as I could throw them, or as far as she may, cackle on television. But it is time, I think, that America recontemplate should we foresee that this situation may arise again in the future. But Legal Eagles, we'll see you a little bit later on in the program. We'll be right back. Hi, friends. Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing and investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Well, if you've been discouraged about the youth vote in America, there are at least some young people who are doing a lot to try to restore Americans to greatness. And one of them is my good friend, Brilyn Hollyhand, who wrote a brand new book that is out today that is titled One Generation Away, Why Now is the Time to Restore American Freedom. So Brilyn joins me now. And tell me all about your book. This is really exciting.
Jenna, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. You've been a friend for several years and have always been a big supporter. So this really, truly means a lot to be able to come here on release day. So I started writing this book in October because I was frustrated with where the country was heading. I was frustrated with the party not necessarily focusing on the youth vote as much as they should. I was frustrated with our country. And my grandparents and parents don't really recognize the America that my generation's growing up in, the generation, that we're supposed to be raising families in here in America. So it was frustration that kind of led to this. Since then, excited that President Trump's now winning the youth vote by 8 points. So we've actually done really well with the youth in the past few months, but it all goes back to these conversations. And really, this book's more than just, working since October. It's 7 years of talking to Americans all across the country as we travel to whether it's college campuses or conventions like we'll be doing next week. But it's also listening to people, and it's listening to people who don't necessarily, I know you hear the same thing, Jenna, but people that don't really have hope in the future. We're trying to reinstill hope. There is hope in America. My hope's in Jesus Christ alone, not in a DC bureaucrat. And that's the message we're trying to get out with this book.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful message. And you're right to echo Reagan's, one generation away. Why do you think there is such a disconnect sometimes between the messaging of, and I think it's both sides, both parties, that kind of ignore the youth vote versus when the youth are really eager to participate in elections? And especially, I remember when I turned 18 and I thought, yay, I'm finally of voting age and I can participate in the great American experiment that I've grown up just really adoring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just turned 18 2 weeks ago, so I'm in that boat right now. I just registered and I couldn't be more excited. So you mentioned Reagan's quote. That's obviously where I got the title from. It's a quote that I finish almost every speech I give with over the past few years. Freedom is one generation away from extinction. And you listen to it and it kind of sounds like a fear-mongering quote, but it's not. It's Reagan being a realist. And this is the 20th anniversary of his passing, but his timeless words of wisdom are absolutely still true today, if not more true. I believe, Jenna, that we are one generation away from extinction. We have to save American freedom now. We can't wait till tomorrow. As Reagan says in the second line of that quote, it's not ours by way of inheritance. It's constantly fought for and defended. He's exactly right. We didn't just get America. It's something that, starting the American Revolution, and since then we've defended it, have fought for and made sure that, hey, here we are as the freedom capital of the world. So that's absolutely something we need. As for both sides of the aisle and their messaging towards, youth vote, I think, and I'll start with our side, It's just been a lack of reaching out in the past. I think that we just haven't done it. And now that we are doing it, as we actually are going on mainstream social media platforms, say TikTok, Instagram, where President Trump is and has the fastest growing account, people are actually reaching out to young people for the first time. And it's not just him, it's just the party as a whole. It's actually reaching out, whether that's through youth conferences, whether it's through college campus tours, and making an actual effort to sit down and have conversations with young people. That's my whole focus next week at convention, is we're working on making sure that we have roundtables with young people to get their, I mean, they're voters just as much as we do. Their vote counts just as much as yours, as my parents, as my grandparents. It's so important to make sure that we're actually courting their vote and not just, assuming that we have it. Because again, Jenna, a Republican presidential candidate has not won the youth vote since 2003. That's major. That's something that we absolutely need to flip around.
Yeah, and I know that you and CJ Pearson are doing a lot of work as co-chairs for the youth in the RNC. And so is your book specifically geared toward that kind of, 18 to maybe 25 age group, or is this kind of for everybody, but really specifically to try to turn out the youth vote?
Great question. So it's actually for 3 groups of people, which I think makes this book so unique. It starts with my peers that are out there that don't necessarily want to have, a job or career in politics. If they do, this is for them as well. But say they don't. They just want to be an innocent bystander, a citizen that also wants to be engaged, that wants to kind of know what's going on, pay attention to politics. This book's for them. This is a starter guide of how to get involved in politics, how to pay attention to politics, how to save the country. But it's more than that. It's also for parents out there. Parents who see the indoctrination that's going on all the way down to pre-K, all the way up to high school education and then universities today, which is insanity. Parents that see that and want to really make a difference, that want to flip the script on that conversation, it's for them.
And we gotta leave it for grandparents. And for grandparents too. And it is One Generation Away by Brilyn Hollyhand. Go and get it on Amazon today. We'll be right back. We're back with our legal eagles, Gerard Filitti and Ron Coleman. And as Congress returns to Capitol Hill this week, the SAVE Act has been one of the most important pieces of legislation that Republicans are championing. And this coming from Axios earlier this week, the House is set to vote on the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE Act, which would require documentary proof of United States citizenship to vote in federal elections. That would include a passport, a photo ID card that proves a voter was born in the U.S., or another form of photo ID, along with supporting documentation such as a birth certificate, the bill says. The legislation would require non-citizens to be removed from voter registration rolls, require election officials to ask voter registration applicants for proof of citizenship, and open them up to legal consequences if they do not. So, Gerard, this seems very basic. I mean, it's already federal law, but this is just requiring that, we go a little bit more above and beyond and require the states to actually administer their elections in a way that doesn't allow for illegals to vote or non-citizens to vote in elections. This shouldn't be controversial, and yet the Democrats are screaming, oh, disenfranchisement, oh no. Well, I'm personally okay if we disenfranchise someone who was never franchised to begin with. So what's the problem here?
Well, it's not disenfranchisement, it's the ease of getting people to register to vote and vote. And the issue ultimately is that there is a lack of trust in who these people are, whether everyone who is registered to vote is entitled to vote, whether they're not citizens or whether they're felons in a state that doesn't allow for felon voting. This is a major problem. And the problem here is, if I want to get on a plane today, I need to show a passport, which has my nationality and citizenship, or I need a real ID. Well, increasingly, I need a real ID, which to get a driver's license with a real ID, I need to provide documentation about my citizenship and my eligibility to be in the country. So I need more proof that I am a U.S. citizen to be able to get on a plane than I do to get into a ballot and vote. And that's a problem. That's a security lapse that it should be simple to remedy. But the Democrats are obstructing this for a simple reason that they're claiming it's inconvenient. Well, inconvenient for whom exactly? Because everyone has access to these documents. Everyone has access to be able to show that you're a citizen. Everyone has free access to these documents. So the Democrats' argument is not really availing. This is more subterfuge to say what? To basically make it harder for registered voters to be able to vote and have their votes counted, because quite frankly, we don't know who these people who are coming to the ballot box really are.
Yeah, so Ron, I mean, clearly this is just, the Democrat messaging that is hiding their ultimate motive. And I think that is that they want to have people who are not eligible actually voting in elections because they tend to favor Democrats. Do you think that that's accurate?
Of course. Of course it's accurate. And to some extent, It is the fault of the federal judiciary. The Supreme Court has repeatedly refused to take up cases at the circuit level that have upheld court orders at the district court level, overturning voter ID laws. The Supreme Court could have ruled on that loud and clear over decades and has refused to do so. So now the cultural norm, not only in the judiciary, but throughout the elite decision-making sectors of our society, are that there's something inherently wrong or racist, which is in and of itself a racist concept. The idea that you have to be white to figure out how to get a driver's license. Just nonsense. Of course, that's exactly what it is, and it's shameful.
So, Gerard, where does this go in terms of election integrity? And, if the SAFE Act does not prevail in Congress, then, we've seen that election integrity has been an issue, well before the 2020 election. I think it just kind of came to the fore because of Donald Trump's campaign and those election challenges in 2020. But this has been an ongoing issue. And it seems like, again, like we were talking about earlier in the program with abortion, it seems like the conservatives just don't have kind of a cohesive strategy to really make progress when the Democrats somehow are just so much better on messaging.
In two ways, you need this effort on a state-by-state basis. You need states to pass legislation within the states, but then you also need Congress to step in, as with the SAFE Act. But ultimately, I think Ron gave you the answer, which is the judiciary needs to get involved. You have these cases. You've had good laws that were passed. You've had courts that have stepped in to block them. But there's the willingness of the appellates, of the circuit courts and the Supreme Court to step in and weigh in on them that has kept these laws for over a decade and a half now from making meaningful change. So really, the pressure here needs to be on the judiciary, not so much the legislature, because the laws are there. The will is there to pass the laws, but they're being stuck in the courts. So until those move along, we won't really have a resolution to this, and our elections won't be as safeguarded as they can and should be.
Well, and staying with you, Gerard, what about the issue of legislative delegation to the executive? I mean, because one of the things that I learned in the aftermath of 2020 was how much of the administration of elections has really been delegated by the legislature, and they don't have a whole lot of genuine oversight. And so a lot of these, just arbitrary rules that the executive branch and all the way through election administration officials can just promulgate, that the courts have decided, okay, that's fair enough because that's the entity. Shouldn't the legislature reclaim some of their authority over those kind of decision making?
Oh, absolutely. And as we've seen in Supreme Court decisions this year, that's the direction the courts are moving in as well. It's not just with elections that the legislature has been delegating to the executive. It's with everything. That's why we have these regulatory agencies that have run amok, and the Supreme Court has been steadily cutting back on them, including overturning the Chevron doctrine to give deference to agency interpretations. So we are seeing the courts weigh in on this and telling the legislature that it needs to be more explicit. And I think you will see this carry over into voting laws as well, because now you can't just have it delegated to a Secretary of State. You need more explicit content. And I think you will see that. And you will, when the next wave of challenges comes to laws that are passed, the courts will consider things differently based on the Supreme Court cases that came out this year.
And so, Ron, yeah, and that's a really interesting observation, and particularly with the Chevron deference being overturned, which was a great opinion. Ron, do you see that there has been that kind of shift in the judiciary as a whole, or is it really just with the Supreme Court majority?
Well, the courts are going to have to follow the Supreme Court. There has been that sort of movement in what I'll call the interior circuit courts. Obviously, the Second and Ninth Circuits remain blissfully uninterested in any change from liberalism of a generation. I do think that you were talking, Jenna, about messaging. The entire purpose of proposing this legislation was messaging. Everyone knows that is not going to pass. There's no way the Senate will even consider this bill. But by making the White House come out and not only fail to support, but actually affirmatively trash a bill that merely says, make sure that the people who vote are entitled to vote, that's actually a form of very powerful messaging. And I actually applaud the GOP for putting it out there.
Yeah, and Representative Roy is doing an excellent job, and so Ron, as well with this type of messaging. I mean, the Democrats have come out and their key line for November is, we need to save democracy, and Sotomayor even made what I consider a political statement in the Trump immunity decision. With fear
Imagine.
for democracy, I know I dissented. It was just utterly ridiculous. So can the GOP ahead of November actually utilize this moment to say, listen, Democrats, this is you that want to tear down all of the safeguards in our system. We're the ones that actually want our constitutional republic to persist with our supreme law of the land.
They can, and to some extent they will, and they won't as much as we want them to. But it is always easy to second guess an armchair quarterback. And as we were saying in another segment, it's the same thing with abortion. You have to really look at that politician's palette of choices, the leverage he does or she does not have or does have. It's very easy for us on social media to decide what absolute position should be. Much harder to get elected and stay in office and get things done.
Yeah, well, I wish that a lot of the elected officials would take your advice from social media than they do the consultant class. But, that's just me. I always appreciate your snark. But closing thoughts on election integrity, Gerard. I mean, do you think that we're better off at least now than we were from 2020? We only have about 30 seconds left.
I don't think we are. We have everything from artificial intelligence to hackers to sophisticated schemes to get people to vote. We have people who just simply show up with buses to nursing homes to get them out to the ballot, which may or may not, those people may be like Joe Biden. They may not know who they're voting for or what they're voting for. So there's a lot to be said for election integrity. And if you can fix it in the small areas, like actually proving that people are citizens and entitled to vote, you should do it. And this is a big issue for this election, but it's going to be a crucial issue to come. Yeah, a lot more work to be done. Legal Eagles, thanks so much. We'll be right back. And finally tonight, let's turn to what's going on the other side of the pond, because of course we want to know what's going on in the world, not just so egocentric here in America, but this coming from CBS News. 2024 French election results, no big win for far right, but next steps unclear. Here's what could happen. From Paris, the election results show French voters have chosen to give a broad leftist coalition the most parliamentary seats in pivotal legislative elections, keeping the far right away from power. Yet no party won an outright majority, putting France in an uncertain, unprecedented situation. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance arrived in second position. The far right, led by Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party, came in third, still drastically increasing the number of seats it holds in the National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament. So joining me now to discuss what's happening in France and also in the UK is Matt Tiermand, who's the head of V24 investigation. So Matt, your take on what's going on?
Well, lots happened in the last couple of weeks because both in the UK and France were snap elections that were not on the calendar if you would have, thought back 2-3 months ago. After the European Union elections, where the right did well all across the continent, is in the process of remaking the European Parliament with an ascendant right-wing power checking on the establishment, Macron held a snap election for fear that when the next election would occur with more time, the right would organize. Same as the UK. It wasn't expected that Rishi Sunak would call the election before November, and here we are, it was on July 4th, because they don't want to see the right continue to organize well, galvanize their base, and catalyze much bigger success. So in the first round of the election, Le Pen's party, a national rally led by 28-year-old Jordan Bardella, an up-and-coming star in European right-wing politics, and a nicer face on the French right than the Le Pen family have been over many decades. They did extraordinarily well. They were the #1 vote getter. It really did match the European Union election. But in France, there's a 2-round system, both in the presidentials and the legislative elections. And in the second round, what we saw happen when all of the Western press was like, far right's ascendant, Le Pen is going to win, Bardella is going to be prime minister. They have multiple candidates in the second round, up to 4 in each constituency. And what happened was the Macron establishment, technocratic, center-right, center-left, kind of squishy, they basically colluded with the far left, socialist, Greens, even outright communists, mostly led by odious figure named Mélenchon, who has already said that they're going to recognize a Palestinian state before he even entered the assembly. They colluded and they made people drop off the ballot. Last Tuesday was the deadline, midnight, and many of those who were eligible to be on the ballot, which would have continued to split and fragment the vote, they just did not put their names on the ballot. So it became a binary construct of for or against the right and Le Pen and Bardella. And as I expected, and I said, publicly, Le Pen was not going to win this. It was going to be 60-40, give or take, and that is what happened. And now you've got a further left government than under Macron. That is, he will need this far left contingent, and they have the levers of power. They're the number one vote getter. They'll have the most seats in the assembly. And Macron he made a Faustian bargain with the devil. And France is not going to move to the right. It's actually going to move to the left. More of the same. More open borders. More asylum grantees under human rights as they import the third world, and crime continues to spike. Ultimately, it'll still be good for the right because more and more people will move to them. The question is, will Le Pen be head of the party? She may resign. She may give one more shot to run for president against Macron in 2 years. The last two times she's gotten to the second round. But the right also did gain some power in the assembly. They went from 80-something seats to 142. But ultimately, they're not going to have that much control. And the fears of the globalist establishment were dispelled one more time because of this French systematic play to operate this way. But it's not good for France the next couple of years. We're going to see some really ridiculous stuff. And there are a lot of corollaries with the UK. Labour swept in, vanquished the squishy Tories. They have an unprecedented mandate. They did about the same in vote getting, about a third of the vote, but they're going to have 2/3 of the seats because of the British parliamentary first past the post system. And Reform got about 15% of the vote, 14 million votes, and got 5 parliamentary seats. The Lib Dems, who are sort of center left, got less than half the amount of votes and have 70 seats. So there's now a big question in the UK about how representative is the democracy when you send to the powerful House of Commons, the true legislature of the UK. If you give this mandate and there's no actual representation, with the right, Nigel had an issue, which is his support was too diffuse around the country. But now the fox is in the hen house, and he will be making a lot of noise. He will be the ideological opposition to Labour, and an unfettered Labour government led by Keir Starmer is going to do also more of the same, not fix the problems, which will ultimately be good for Reform. And in the next 2 years, should this government collapse, Reform will be in very good position to both take support from the Tories and Labour, which is very unusual. They'll be taking from the center right and the left. So they're going to be ascendant and will continue to grow. It's not unconceivable we see Nigel Farage as prime minister in the next 4 years.
Wow, that would be incredible. So Matt Tierman, thanks so much for that update. And I appreciate, kind of that just encapsulation of what's going on, because we need to be paying attention, of course, to what's going on to conservatism and, the far right and populism all around the world. That's all the time we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. Make it a great night.